The arrival of the unknown. The celestial dawn moved like a silent wraith through the endless void, its hull gleaming under the distant light of an unknown star. The ship, a marvel of Terran engineering, had been built for exploration, not war. Yet as it drifted deeper into uncharted space, a sense of unease settled over the crew like a thick, invisible fog. Captain Ilias Mercer stood on the bridge, arms crossed, his sharp blue eyes scanning the array of holographic displays before him. The ship's sensors had picked up something massive and unexplainable lurking just beyond their range. The veteran explorer had seen many anomalies in his years of deep space travel, but this felt different. A faint hum filled the air as Lieutenant Aria Kessler, the ship's xenologist, adjusted the long-range scanners. She leaned forward, her fingers dancing across the glowing interface, refining the ship's telemetry. "Captain," she said, voice tight with barely contained urgency. "You might want to see this." Elias stepped forward, his boots making no sound against the reinforced deck plating. He turned his gaze to the forward display just as the distortion appeared. At first, it was nothing but a ghostly shimmer against the backdrop of stars, a ripple in the very fabric of space. But as the celestial dawn moved closer, the shimmer solidified into something impossible. A structure. Not a ship, not an asteroid. A massive, looming construct of obsidian and shifting energy fields, floating motionless in the void. Its surface gleamed with an unnatural sheen, as if it were not just metal, but something alive. Strange, pulsating symbols adorned its exterior, glowing in rhythmic patterns of deep crimson and violet. A cold whisper seemed to brush against the minds of the crew, an intangible feeling of being watched. Ensign Patel, one of the newer crew members, swallowed hard. "That's not natural," he murmured. "That thing, it's ancient." Before anyone could respond, the celestial dawn sensors erupted in a cascade of alerts. A powerful energy surge rippled outward from the structure, engulfing the ship like an unseen tidal wave. The bridge lights flickered, and for a brief moment, an oppressive silence filled the air, as though the universe itself had paused. Then, without warning, "Incoming transmission," Aria announced, eyes locked on her display. "We're being hailed, Captain." Elias exhaled, his expression unreadable. On screen, the main display shimmered, and an alien visage materialized before them. The being was unlike anything they had encountered before. Tall, slender, with an elongated skull adorned with intricate bioluminescent patterns. Its eyes, deep-set and luminous like molten gold, seemed to pierce straight through the screen, dissecting every soul aboard the ship with silent, predatory intelligence. Its smooth, chitinous skin gleamed under an eerie, shifting light. When it finally spoke, its voice slithered through the air like an unseen predator, low and deliberate. "You have entered the domain of the Zorke Imperium," it intoned. "Identify yourselves, or be erased." A chill settled over the bridge. Elias squared his shoulders, his voice calm yet firm. "I am Captain Ilias Mercer of the Celestial Dawn, a vessel representing the United Terran Federation. We come in peace and seek only knowledge." The alien's eyes narrowed slightly. There was a pause, long enough to make even the most seasoned officers feel the weight of the moment. Then, slowly, the creature let out a sound. It was neither laughter nor a growl, but something in between, a guttural, knowing amusement. "Humans," it said, rolling the word in its throat as though tasting it. "So fragile, so unaware of their place." A new tension filled the room. Ilias didn't move, didn't blink. He had seen this before, the look of a predator gazing at easy prey. But humanity had been underestimated before, and it had never ended well for those who did. The alien leaned forward slightly, its golden eyes burning with cold amusement. "Your kind has been observed, studied, deemed insufficient." Elias's jaw tightened, but he remained still. "Is that so?" he said evenly. A second, more distorted voice joined the first, like a chorus of shadows overlapping in the void. Your vessels are weak. Your reach is short. Your species is an anomaly that will soon be corrected. That was when the ship's alarms flared to life. "Captain," Patel shouted, "they're powering up something." Before he could finish, a pulse of energy surged from the alien construct. The celestial dawn shuddered violently as a wave of unseen force swept over it. Consoles flickered and died, the hum of the ship's systems sputtering under the strain of an unknown interference. "Shields are failing," Lieutenant Graves barked. "They're using some kind of energy field. It's disrupting everything." Elias clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had expected hostility, but this was something else. The Zork weren't just testing them. They were preparing to eliminate them. "Cut engines," he ordered. "Let them think we're vulnerable." Kessler turned to him sharply. "Sir, trust me." The bridge crew hesitated, then obeyed. The ship's thrusters powered down, leaving the celestial dawn drifting, seemingly helpless. The alien on the screen tilted its head slightly, watching, waiting. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then Elias moved. "Graves," he said, voice like steel, "on my mark, reverse polarity on our deflector array. Patel, prepare an overload on the forward emitters. When I give the signal, I want a full burst." Realization dawned on Patel's face. "Sir," that cooled. "Do it." The crew rushed to their stations, fingers flying over controls, fighting against the flickering systems to execute their captain's unorthodox command. Elias turned his gaze back to the alien on the screen. "You made a mistake," he said, his voice now calm. "Certain." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Explain." A slow smile formed at the corner of Elias's lips. "You assumed we were weak. Then. Now." The celestial dawn roared to life. Energy surged through its systems as the reverse polarized deflector array unleashed a shockwave, disrupting the enemy's energy field for a split second. In that instant, the forward emitters erupted, sending a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse directly into the Zork's core systems. The alien's face twisted in shock. The transmission cut out. Outside, the massive construct flickered, its energy lattice spasming under the unexpected retaliation. On the bridge, the crew watched, breath held, as the once menacing structure began to dim, its once pulsating symbols fading into darkness. For the first time since they had entered this sector, the void was silent again. Elias took a slow breath. "Patel." The ensign blinked, his fingers racing over the console. "They're backing off. Whatever we did, it disrupted their systems." The crew let out a collective exhale, but Elias remained still, watching the alien fortress as it slowly drifted backward, recalibrating, analyzing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. A predator's patience. The celestial dawn floated in uneasy silence, the Zork construct now nothing more than a dark silhouette against the void. The once pulsing sigils on its surface had dimmed, flickering erratically like a dying ember. But Captain Elias Mercer knew better than to assume victory. He stood on the bridge, every muscle in his body tense. He had seen this tactic before, not from aliens, but from Earth's deadliest predators. A wolf never lunges without first testing its prey. "Status?" he asked, voice low. Lieutenant Graves tapped frantically at his console. "They've stopped transmitting. No energy buildup, no weapons active. But they're still there, Captain." "Of course they are," Elias murmured. He turned toward Ensign Patel. "What about our systems?" "Running diagnostics now," Patel said. "We took a hit, but the EMP burst did its job. They weren't expecting that." Kessler, the ship's xenologist, narrowed her eyes at the screen. "Captain, I don't think they're retreating. I think they're watching." Elias exhaled slowly, like a scientist watches a lab rat. Kessler nodded. "Exactly. Elias had spent enough time on the frontiers of space to recognize a hunter's patience. The Zork weren't in rage. They weren't panicked. They were studying them, dissecting the moment, adapting. "They're waiting to see what we do next," he muttered. Aria Kessler turned back to her console, her fingers moving in rapid bursts. "I don't like this, Captain. The Zork aren't just another empire. They have a reputation in the galactic archives. They don't conquer like most species. They erase." Elias's jaw clenched. "Explain." Kessler hesitated, then pulled up the data they had scavenged from old, fragmented records. The holographic display shifted, revealing a series of dead worlds, silent, barren husks orbiting distant suns. The planets had no craters, no visible scars of war, just silence. "They don't burn civilizations to the ground," Kessler continued, voice grim. "They remove them. No ruins, no bodies, no history. It's like those worlds never had life at all." A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Elias studied the alien structure ahead, his mind racing. The Zork had deemed humanity insufficient. That wasn't just arrogance, it was a verdict. We were an anomaly that needed to be corrected. He turned sharply. "We need more intel. Patel, can we launch a probe without drawing attention?" Patel hesitated. A standard probe would be noticed. But he paused, considering. "We could piggyback a microdrone on the debris field from the EMP blast. It'd blend in." Elias nodded. "Do it." Patel's fingers danced across the console, launching a small, nearly invisible probe into the debris still drifting between them and the Zork vessel. The bridge held its breath as the tiny drone maneuvered through the wreckage, sending back live telemetry. The data streamed in, radiation readings, energy fluctuations, and something else, something alive. Kessler's breath hitched. "Captain, I'm picking up life signs." Elias turned sharply. "Inside the structure." She shook her head. "No, outside." The image on the main screen flickered and refocused. There, barely visible against the construct's dark hull, was movement. At first, it seemed like shadows shifting unnaturally. But then, a shape unfolded from the ship's surface. Long, sinuous. Its body was sleek and serpentine, yet lined with armored plating that rippled as it moved. Its many limbs extended, twisting in ways that defied normal physics. And its head, if it could even be called that, was a mass of shifting plates, each one bristling with bioluminescent nodes that pulsed in an unsettling rhythmic pattern. And then it looked at them. Even through the screen, the bridge crew felt it. A cold, piercing awareness. "Captain," Patel whispered, "I don't think that's a crew member. I think that's part of the ship." Elias exhaled slowly. A biomechanical construct, a living warform. And it had just noticed the probe. The thing twitched, and in a single fluid motion, its elongated form lunged. The probe's feed cut out instantly. The bridge went dark for half a second before the ship's emergency lighting flickered back on. Kessler was pale. "It saw through us." Elias straightened. "Patel, cut all non-essential transmissions. Graves, prepare for evasive maneuvers. We are no longer observers. We're the observed." A sudden pulse erupted from the Zork ship. This one wasn't an attack. It was a message. The screens across the bridge filled with strange, shifting symbols. Then, the symbols translated themselves. "You are not worthy." Then, another line appeared. "Kuorisiki in Koning." Elias's blood ran cold. "They're done watching." The Zork construct began to hum. The flickering symbols across its hull flared back to life, no longer erratic, but purposeful. Patel's hands shook as he read the sensor data. "Captain, they're not powering weapons. He stopped, eyes wide in disbelief. "They're rewriting space itself." A holographic display revealed an impossible sight. Space around the Zork vessel was warping, folding in on itself. Not like a standard warp drive, not even like a black hole. This was something else entirely. A controlled restructuring of reality. "They're deleting us," Kessler whispered. Elias didn't hesitate. "All hands, brace for emergency jump. Now." Graves shouted over the alarms. "Sir, we're still too close to their field. If we jump now, the drive cooled. We don't have a choice." Elias roared. The Celestial Dawn's engines flared to life, its warp drive struggling against the impossible forces tearing at the fabric of space. The Zork structure pulsed one final time, and reality rippled. For a fraction of a second, Elias saw what the Zork had done to the other civilizations. He saw their history, their worlds, their very existence being rewritten into nothingness. It was not war. It was not destruction. It was erasure, a correction of something the Zork deemed wrong in the cosmos. Then the Celestial Dawn jumped. The ship was violently torn from the brink, catapulted into the vast, unknown dark. The last thing Elias saw before the blackness swallowed them was the golden, glowing eyes of the Zork warform, watching, waiting, and knowing they would meet again. The void remembers. The Celestial Dawn hurtled through hyperspace, its hull groaning under the strain of the emergency jump. Alarms screamed across the ship, drowning out the panicked chatter of the crew. Lights flickered as the warp drive struggled to stabilize, forcing Elias to grip the edge of the captain's chair. "Report," he shouted over the chaos. Patel's voice was tight with barely restrained fear. "We're off course, Captain. The jump was too rough. The coordinates are scrambled. I don't even know where we are yet." Graves swore as he worked the controls. "Hull integrity at 68%. Shields are down, and damn it, we lost 2 reactors during the jump. We're running on backup power." Elias exhaled, steadying himself. "Are we being followed?" Kessler checked the sensors. No signs of pursuit, but that doesn't mean we're safe. Elias turned toward Patel. "Get me a star map as soon as possible. We need to figure out where the hell we landed." Patel's fingers flew over the console, sweat beading on his forehead. The ship's computer groaned as it tried to process the celestial data. Finally, after an agonizing moment, a distorted star chart flickered onto the main display. The bridge went silent. "That's not possible," Patel whispered. Elias narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Patel swallowed hard. "According to the navigational data, we're outside the known galaxy." A cold weight settled in Elias's chest. "Run it again." Patel did. Same result. Elias forced himself to stay calm. "How far?" Patel hesitated. "Captain, the nearest known star system is over 500,000 light-years away." No one spoke. They weren't just lost. They were beyond lost. Kessler paled. "That's impossible. Even with our most advanced warp drives, we shouldn't have been able to." "They didn't just attack us," Elias murmured. "They displaced us." A silence fell over the bridge. The Zork hadn't needed weapons. They hadn't needed to pursue. They had simply moved them like pieces off a board. Elias clenched his jaw. "We need to reestablish our bearings and find a way back." "Graves, damage report." Graves scowled. "It's bad. Hull integrity is compromised, shields are fried, and our main warp drive is." He stopped. Elias turned sharply. "What?" Graves stared at his console, brow furrowed. I don't understand. The warp drive should be offline. It should be fried after what we just went through." "But," Graves hesitated, "it's repairing itself." The bridge crew exchanged wary glances. That was impossible. The Celestial Dawn was cutting-edge human engineering, but it wasn't self-repairing. Elias stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Graves tapped the screen, magnifying the diagnostics. "The drive is regenerating. Nano repair systems are active, but they're working at an efficiency we've never seen before." Patel's eyes widened. "That doesn't make sense. The repair systems should only function at 20% capacity under these conditions. We lost 2 reactors. Where is it getting the extra power? Kessler's face darkened. What if it isn't just our tech anymore? The realization struck like a lightning bolt. The celestial dawn had passed through the Zork's spatial distortion. It had been touched by their manipulation of reality itself. And now something was different. Elias didn't like it. Run a full diagnostic scan. I want to know if anything else has changed. Patel nodded, fingers dancing across the console. As the scan ran, a strange hum echoed through the ship. A vibration, deep and alien. Then, the lights flickered, and the ship's communication array crackled to life. A voice, not human, whispered through the static. "We see you." Kessler's breath hitched. "Captain, that transmission isn't coming from outside." Elias turned slowly. "Where is it coming from?" She swallowed hard. Inside the ship. A ghost in the machine. The bridge's air felt thick with tension. The whispering static continued, warping and twisting. Uncorrected anomaly. Elias's fingers clenched around the armrest of his chair. "Shut it down." Patel tried. I can't. The comm system isn't responding." The whispering grew louder. "Correction required." Then, the lights died. Total darkness. The ship shuddered. The bridge crew barely had time to react before emergency lighting flickered on, red and dim, casting eerie shadows across the walls. And then, the star map changed. It had been blank before. Now, something was there. A beacon. A single pulsing point of light in the impossible void. Kessler's voice was barely a whisper. That wasn't there before. Elias's mind raced. The Zork had tossed them into an unknown part of space, yet here, suddenly, was a signal, a direction. Too convenient. Could be a trap, Graves muttered. Could be our only way out, Patel countered. Elias stared at the beacon. It pulsed rhythmically, almost invitingly. Then, the whispering returned. "Follow." Patel's breathing was unsteady. "Captain, whatever's speaking, it's connected to our systems now." Elias exhaled sharply. "No choice. We head for the beacon." The crew hesitated, but there was no other alternative. Graves, divert power to engines. Patel, keep running scans. If anything changes, I want to know immediately. The celestial dawn turned toward the beacon. As they moved forward, something shifted outside. The stars, those distant, ancient beacons of light, began to distort. Kessler's voice was shaky. "Captain, the stars aren't behaving normally." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" She swallowed. "Look." The star map flickered. The distant points of light were moving, but not in the way they should. Some twisted in on themselves. Others stretched unnaturally. It was like space itself was watching. The whispering grew more insistent. "Follow, before they find you." A new terror settled in Elias's gut. Who was warning them? And more importantly, who was hunting them? The starless abyss, the celestial dawn surged toward the beacon, its engines humming with a strange, unfamiliar efficiency. Patil monitored the ship's diagnostics, eyes darting over lines of data that made no sense. "This isn't just an efficiency boost," he murmured. "It's as if the ship is evolving." Kessler finished grimly. Elias gritted his teeth. "Whatever happened to us when we passed through the Zork's manipulation of space, it's still happening. The ship wasn't just recovering, it was changing." And the whispering voice had yet to return. The beacon pulsed ahead, a singular point in the infinite dark, yet the closer they got, the more unnatural space itself became. The distant stars, already behaving strangely, began to fade. Not disappear, not blink out. They were being consumed. One by one, those celestial bodies, some billions of years old, collapsed into the void, vanishing without a trace. Kessler's hands trembled over the controls. "This isn't a star system," she said quietly. "This is something else." Elias had never seen her rattled before. "What do you mean?" Patil zoomed in on the area ahead. The beacon's light cut through an emptiness unlike anything recorded in human history. Not a nebula, not a black hole, a complete absence. "This place, it shouldn't exist," Patel whispered. "The laws of physics don't apply here." The crew was silent. Then, without warning, the ship stopped. No impact, no inertia, just absolute stillness. Graves cursed as he checked the thrusters. "Engines are running. We should still be moving." But they weren't. Something unseen held them in place. And then, the whisper returned. "You should not be here." It wasn't the same voice as before. This one was deeper, heavier, less like a whisper and more like the crushing weight of an ocean pressing down. The beacon pulsed. Once. Then, a shape emerged from the abyss. The forgotten sentinel. It was titanic. Elias had seen capital ships before, floating behemoths that carried the weight of planetary sieges on their backs. But this dwarfed any ship ever built. It wasn't a structure. It wasn't even alive in the way biological beings understood. It was a sentinel, a guardian crafted from materials beyond human comprehension. Jagged metallic ridges, shifting plates that shimmered in and out of existence, and a central eye, a massive void-ringed orb that watched them. Patel's breath hitched. "It's scanning us." The whispering grew louder, resonating through the ship's systems. "You are the anomaly." Elias forced himself to stand tall. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "We were the first." A cold chill ran through the crew. The first. Before the Zorkai. Before the current galactic civilizations. Kessler's hands hovered over the controls, prepared to launch countermeasures. Though they all knew such an action would be meaningless. Elias steadied his voice. "What do you mean by we?" The massive entity pulsed with dark energy. "We were the architects. The builders. The ones who shaped the void before it was stolen." A sound like the echo of time itself rumbled through the ship. Patil whispered, "They're ancient." Graves was less impressed. "Yeah, and they're the ones stopping us from moving." He clenched his fists. "If they want to fight." The whisper cut through him like a blade. "There is no fight. There is only correction." The ship trembled. The systems flickered as if something unmaking had brushed against them. Kessler's voice was sharp. "Captain, this thing is trying to dismantle us." Elias felt it too. The celestial dawn was being undone, not attacked, not destroyed. Erased. The same way the stars had disappeared. They weren't just lost. They were never supposed to exist here. And now, something was trying to fix that mistake. Elias gritted his teeth. Reverse thrusters. Full power. Graves slammed the controls. The ship lurched backward, struggling, resisting. But the force holding them was stronger. The sentinel's voice deepened. "You are contamination. Defiance against the void." The high-pitched whine filled the bridge. Patil paled. "Captain, we're being restructured at a molecular level. I don't know how much time we have before." Elias made a snap decision. Divert all remaining power to the warp core. Patil's eyes widened. That could kill us. So could sitting here. Graves didn't hesitate. Rerouting power. The ship shook violently. The engines flared, burning brighter than they ever had before. But the sentinel remained motionless, its singular gaze locked onto them. Elias stared up at it, jaw clenched. "I don't care how ancient you are. You don't get to decide what exists and what doesn't." For the first time, the sentinel hesitated. Elias felt something. A shift. The same whispering force that had changed their ship. It was inside him now. A knowledge not his own flooded his mind. The sentinel was not invincible. It was a relic of an age-long past, bound by rules written into the fabric of the universe itself. Rules that could be broken. Elias exhaled. Graves. Fire everything. Graves didn't question it. Missiles, pulse cannons, plasma turrets, every weapon the celestial dawn had left unleashed hell against the Sentinel. The attacks should have been meaningless. And yet, the Sentinel faltered. The void around them cracked. The whispering turned into a scream. Then, light. A brilliant, impossible burst of energy shattered the abyss. The celestial dawn was thrown back, slamming into real space. Stars reappeared. The unnatural darkness was gone. The ship shuddered but remained intact. The beacon vanished. Silence returned to the bridge. Patil gasped for breath. What the hell just happened? Elias sat back, exhausted. We broke their rules. Kessler stared at the now normalized star map. Where are we? Patil checked his readings. Then, he froze. Captain. Elias frowned. What? Patil looked up, voice shaking. We're not lost anymore. A tense silence. Then, we're home. Elias's heart pounded. Impossible. They had traveled 500,000 light years. They had been beyond the galaxy, beyond reality itself. Yet, Earth's sun shone in the distance, against all odds, against all laws of physics and reason. They had made it back. Elias exhaled, staring at the stars, and something deep in the void remembered them. The echoes of what should not be. The celestial dawn drifted in the quiet void of the Sol system, its battered hull reflecting the golden light of Earth's sun. The crew sat in stunned silence. They were home. Yet, the moment felt wrong. Elias gripped the edge of his captain's chair, his mind struggling to process the impossible. Moments ago, they had been trapped in an abyss where the very laws of existence had begun to unravel. Now, Earth lay before them. Patil broke the silence, his voice uneven. This doesn't make sense. We were 500,000 light years away. Graves let out a sharp breath. Yeah. Well, someone forgot to tell reality. The ship's long-range sensors flickered erratically before stabilizing. Earth's orbital stations, Luna's colonies, and even the distant glimmer of Mars' terraforming domes came into focus. Everything looked intact, unchanged. But something deep inside Elias twisted, a nameless dread clawing at the edges of his consciousness. Something was off. Ghosts in the machine. Kessler ran diagnostics, fingers flying over the controls. I don't get it, she murmured. Earth's fleet hasn't flagged us as unidentified. No alerts. No hails. Patil frowned. You're saying they recognize us? Kessler's brow furrowed. No, I'm saying they expected us. Silence hung over the bridge. Graves, who had always been the least inclined to philosophize, crossed his arms. All right, let's stop with the cryptic crap. Are we actually back, or is this some kind of illusion? Elias turned to Patil. Check our comm logs. When was the last transmission we sent? Patil accessed the records, and immediately froze. His face went pale. Elias's chest tightened. What is it? Patil swallowed hard. We sent a transmission 3 days ago. Impossible. Kessler snapped. We were in deep space. Patil turned the monitor toward them. A log entry flickered on the screen, time-stamped exactly 72 hours prior. The captain's own voice echoed through the bridge speakers. Mission successful. Returning home. No casualties. A cold chill settled over the crew. Elias never sent that message. A world that knows too much. Before the weight of that realization could sink in, the incoming transmission alert chimed. Elias hesitated, then motioned for Patil to put it through. A familiar face flickered onto the holoscreen. Admiral Riker. His weathered features were the same as Elias remembered, lined with the kind of exhaustion that only came from years of fighting battles humanity was never meant to win. But his eyes, they were too calm, as if none of this was a surprise. Captain Shaw, Riker greeted, his tone level. Good to have you back. Elias chose his words carefully. Admiral, you don't seem surprised to see us. Riker's expression didn't change. Should I be? The unease in Elias's gut deepened. We were lost beyond the galaxy, he said, missing for months. Yet, according to our logs, we reported success 3 days ago. Riker didn't even blink. Yes, and you returned as scheduled. Kessler sucked in a breath. What the hell does that mean? Riker exhaled. For the first time, his mask of indifference cracked, just slightly. We need to talk, he said. Dock at station Epsilon 9. I'll explain everything. Then the transmission cut out. The history that was never written. Tension gripped the bridge as the celestial dawn aligned with the station's docking bay. The moment they stepped onto the station, something became horribly clear. They weren't the only ones who remembered. Crew members of other ships avoided their gaze. Engineers whispered as they passed, their eyes full of a quiet dread. Even the station itself felt wrong. The layout was identical to what Elias remembered, yet subtle things, signs, corridor lengths, the faint hum of the artificial gravity, were just slightly off. Patel stopped abruptly in the hallway, staring at a mission roster on the wall. Elias followed his gaze and felt his blood run cold. U.S. Celestial Dawn, Captain Elias Shaw. State U.S. Common Pilated. Below that, the roster listed their entire crew. And next to every name, in bold final letters, DCEAZ. A sharp silence fell over them. Graves muttered, "That's some kind of clerical error." But they all knew the truth. As far as Earth was concerned, they weren't supposed to be alive. The Admiral's secret. The debriefing room was dimly lit, the air thick with unspoken tension. Admiral Riker stood before them, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Elias kept his voice steady. "What happened to us?" Riker's gaze flickered, just for a moment. Then he said, "You made it back. That's all that matters." Patel stepped forward, his voice sharp. "That's not an answer." Riker sighed. "No, it's not." Then he pulled out a small data drive and slid it across the table. Elias hesitated, then plugged it into the console. A single file appeared. Classified. He opened it. What he saw made his breath hitch. The file was a detailed report. It contained flight logs, mission data, and recovered distress signals from the Celestial Dawn. Elias scrolled further, and his pulse hammered. The ship had returned before. 7 times. Each time, a version of them docked at the station, was debriefed, and then vanished, as if they had never existed. Kessler's voice was hoarse. "What the hell is this?" Riker's voice was quiet. "You were lost, Captain, and something out there kept sending you back." Elias's fingers curled into a fist. "Then where are the crews from the other missions?" Riker didn't answer. He didn't have to. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. They had been erased. The final warning. Elias exhaled, his mind racing. "We aren't supposed to be here, are we?" Riker's jaw tensed. "No, you aren't." Patel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then why are we still alive?" Riker looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time. And this time, there was fear in his eyes. "Because something changed," he said. "Something. Let you stay." Kessler shook her head. "But why?" Riker hesitated. Then, the station lights flickered, and the whisper returned. "You were never meant to leave." The same impossible presence they had escaped now lingered in their world. The void had followed them home. A world that knows our names. The station lights flickered once, then twice, before stabilizing. But in that brief moment of darkness, something moved. Not in the room, not in the station, in reality itself. A ripple, a distortion, like a film reel skipping frames. The air felt too thick, the walls too close, as if the universe was struggling to decide whether they should exist at all. Elias's fingers dug into the table as the whisper echoed once more. You were never meant to leave. Admiral Riker stiffened, his expression unreadable. But his eyes held the same thing Elias felt in his gut. Fear. Real, raw fear. Patil swallowed hard. Tell me I didn't just hear that. Kessler's hands hovered over her console, but the screen glitched, distorting into unreadable gibberish before snapping back into normal display. Graves rubbed his face, muttering, I swear to God, if we just brought some interdimensional horror back with us. Riker cut him off. Listen to me, all of you. His voice was steel, but there was an urgency to it. You need to understand something. You, this version of you, shouldn't be here. Every time the Celestial Dawn returned before, the crew was removed. Elias's jaw tightened. You mean killed? Riker's expression didn't change. No. Erased. A long silence followed. Then Patil exhaled, shaking his head. How? How do you erase an entire crew? Riker hesitated. Then he pulled a small matte black device from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was barely the size of a coin, yet the very sight of it made Elias's skin crawl. This, Riker said. This is how. The device that ends names. Elias stared at it. What is it? Riker's fingers curled into a fist. A failsafe. Kessler's voice wavered. Failsafe for what? Riker let out a slow breath. To correct what shouldn't be. A cold chill ran through Elias's spine. This deletes people. No, Riker said. It deletes everything about them. Memories, records, the concept of their existence. Silence. Graves broke it with a humorless laugh. You expect us to believe you've got a button that just unmakes people. That's sci-fi horror nonsense. Riker met his gaze. Where do you think you are right now, Lieutenant? Graves opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he knew. They were standing in the middle of a nightmare where time and space had already bent in impossible ways, where their own voices had sent messages they never recorded, where they had died and yet still walked. This was no longer about belief. This was about what came next. The truth they weren't supposed to know. Elias exhaled, forcing his mind to focus. We made it back, he said. Something let us stay. But you still have this device. What does that mean? Riker hesitated. Then, for the first time, his iron facade cracked. It means I don't know if I should use it. A sickening realization settled over the room. Before, every version of the Celestial Dawn was erased, Patil murmured. But this time, we weren't. Kessler's voice was barely above a whisper. Why? Riker looked at the black device like it was a loaded gun. And then, the station shuddered. The lights dimmed, flickered, and stayed off. In the absolute darkness, a sound slithered through the room. Not footsteps. Not machinery. Something else. Something remembering. You were never meant to leave. The rift in reality. The emergency lights bathed the station in a red glow. The holo displays flickered wildly, distortion rippling through them like corrupted memories. Kessler checked her screen. We've lost station-wide power. Backup systems are struggling to. She froze. Her breath hitched. Elias turned toward her. What? She slowly lifted a trembling hand and pointed at the holoscreen. It showed the Celestial Dawn's bridge. Only. They were still there. Elias, Patil, Kessler, Graves, the entire crew. Standing, talking, moving, as if they had never left the ship. Patil's voice cracked. That's us. Riker paled. No, that's the version of you that never left. A deep, gut-wrenching horror settled over Elias. The whisper returned, stronger this time. Choose. The choice that should not exist. Elias clenched his fists. What does it mean? What the hell are we choosing between? Riker turned toward him, his expression grim. That device, it doesn't just erase people. It corrects timelines. Elias's stomach twisted. Patil shook his head. stepping back. No, no, this is insane. You're telling me one version of us has to go. Kessler looked back at the holoscreen, her face drained of color. They don't know. They don't know we're watching them. Graves exhaled. So what happens if we do nothing? Riker didn't answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was haunted. Then reality decides for you. And then, the station screamed. It wasn't metal. It wasn't alarms. It was something inside the walls. Something undoing. The universe had run out of patience. Elias turned to his crew. They had minutes, maybe less. One version of them would stay. One version of them would be erased. And Elias Shaw would have to decide which one. The ones who remain. The station shook. Not a tremor. Not an explosion. Something deeper. Something fundamental. The walls groaned as if the universe itself was folding in, warping under forces it was never meant to withstand. The holoscreen flickered, distorting between frames of impossible realities. Flashes of the celestial dawn drifting in a black void, their own faces staring blankly back at them, from places that should not exist. And then, a choice. Elias stood at the center of it, the black device in his hands. A single press, a single moment, and one version of them would be erased. The version still on the ship, living, breathing, unaware. Or them, the ones who had returned, who had broken the cycle. Elias. Patel's voice was quiet, but urgent. His knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the table, his entire body bracing against the weight of what was happening. We can't just. A scream tore through the station speakers. Not human. Not even remotely organic. A distortion in sound itself. Something stretching, something unraveling. The whisper that had haunted them from the moment they returned was no longer a whisper. It was a command. Choose. The cost of existence. Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. There has to be another way. There isn't, Riker said, his voice steady, his eyes locked on the device. This station, this timeline, it's being torn apart because two versions of the same people can't exist here. You press that button, and one of them is gone. Forever. Kessler let out a sharp breath. And if we don't? Riker's jaw tightened. Then you risk both being erased. A cold silence. Patel's voice wavered. They don't even know. The other us. They're just living their lives. They don't know we're watching them, deciding whether they get to keep existing. Graves exhaled, shaking his head. This is insane. Kessler swallowed. No, this is worse than insane. This is wrong. The station trembled again. The flickering red emergency lights cast deep shadows, stretching and twisting. The holoscreen showed static, flickering glimpses of something else moving inside the corridors, shapes that were almost human but not quite. Something had started watching them now. Something hungry. Elias. Riker's voice pulled him back. This isn't just about you. Or them. This is about everything. Elias closed his eyes for a second. The weight of a universe's decision pressed against his chest. His entire life, he had been trained to make the hard calls. As a captain, as a leader, he had made choices that risked lives. But this wasn't just life or death. This was erasure. Final. Absolute. A choice that should never belong to a human being. And yet, he had to choose. The press of a button. The tremors grew stronger. Something was breaking. A low, inhuman growl reverberated through the metal floor. Kessler flinched. I don't think we have much time left. Elias forced his breathing to slow. His thumb hovered over the activation pad of the device. He thought of the other them. Still on the ship, still going through their routine. Laughing. Living. Completely unaware that an impossible version of themselves had returned. And that he, this Elias, was about to decide who got to stay. Then, a thought. A single, impossible thought. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Elias felt something like clarity. His hand tightened on the device, and instead of pressing the button, he turned it over, breaking the rules. Riker's eyes widened. "Elias, what are you doing?" Elias didn't answer. He gripped the edge of the device, feeling along its surface. Riker had said it was a failsafe, a way to erase, to correct. But failsafes worked in both directions. A correction didn't just remove. It restored. And if that was true, then maybe, just maybe, it could make something impossible happen. The device was designed to remove paradoxes, to erase conflicting timelines. But what if he could use it to fuse them instead? To make two versions of the same people one? He took a breath. His fingers moved. A sequence Riker hadn't shown him. A hidden function. A choice that had never been made before. And then, he pressed the button. The moment reality collapsed, everything stopped. No movement. No sound. The station, the air, the fabric of reality itself, frozen. Then, a ripple. Not an explosion. Not destruction. But fusion. Elias felt it before he understood it. A rush of thoughts, memories, emotions that weren't just his own. Flashes of a version of himself still standing on the celestial dawn, still unaware of the horror unfolding in the station. And then, it was him. Not two versions. Not a paradox. Just one. All the choices, all the moments, merged into a singular, undeniable existence. The tremors ceased. The whispers vanished. And when Elias looked around, he saw the same stunned realization in his crew's eyes. They had all merged. They had all become whole. The universe had been corrected. Not by erasure, but by acceptance. A world that knows their names. The station lights flickered back to life. The holoscreen stabilized. Elias felt his pulse slow. He looked at his hands. Still there. Real. And when he turned to his crew, there was no hesitation. They were all still here. No erasure. No paradox. Just one version of them, existing as they should. Riker let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "That was either the smartest thing you've ever done," he muttered, "or the dumbest." Elias exhaled, feeling the last traces of fear dissolve. Maybe both. A long pause. Then Patel let out a sharp laugh, half disbelief, half sheer exhaustion. "So, that's it. We're alive." Elias glanced at the holoscreen. The ship was still there, but the distortion was gone. No paradox, no second version of them. The universe had settled. "Yeah," he said finally. "We're alive." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Kessler smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Guess we made history, huh?" Elias let out a breath. "No," he said. "We became it."